In this video, I'm going to remove the green background and replace it with an image. Before I jump into the Ultra Key effect, I want to go into my Lumetri panel and open my basic correction. You're going to see a white balance selector, and you can click on this eyedropper tool and then select anywhere on your screen where you might have a white piece of paper or a white background, just to help adjust my temperature and my tint before I jump into the green screen. So in this image, you'll see there's a little bit of kind of white back here, and it's kind of close enough. It's not the most professional way to do this, but this definitely helps when you're in a bind. So you just click on this white balance selector, and I zoomed in here, and I'm going to click on this white area. And then when I hit fit, you'll notice that the temperature and the tint are quite a bit different than what they were before. When I toggle this effect on and off, you're going to notice this is what it looked like before. And then you will notice that there really was a lot more pink tint than she needed. And so I'm going to toggle the effect back on and maybe just reduce it a little bit, because I think maybe it was a little too green, but this looks a little bit more natural. So the goal is just to make everything look the way it really looks in real life. So once I've gotten my white balance about where I want it, I'm going to go into my effects panel, and I'm just going to type in Ultra. And you'll notice the Ultra Key effect pops up down here. So I can click and drag this and drop it right on top of my video. You'll notice I put my video on V2 as opposed to V1, and that's because we're going to be layering an image behind this, and I'll explain that here in just a second. If you go into your effects control panel, if that's not open, you can always go into your windows and make sure that effects control here is selected. So I'm going into my effects control panel, and you'll see this is the Lumetri effect that we just did when we did the white balance. And here is the actual green screen Ultra Key effect that we're going to be working on today. So the first thing that I want to do before I jump in and key her out is I actually want to mask her. So one common mistake people make when keying, they accidentally jump into the Ultra Key effect and start using the free draw. But before we jump in here, it's really important that we scroll back up and then go over to this section. So if you're ever trying to key something and you're looking at it and it's just not working, this is very often people's mistake, is they'll jump right into the Ultra Key effect without first starting with this step. So I'm going to click on this, and that'll allow me to create a mask around Courtney here. And I'm just going to do like a pretty big one, but you can tighten this up a lot more. But for the sake of time, I won't add too many. The big thing that you need to do now is you have to connect these dots. So I'm going to click back on my original dot, and then it connects everything, and you'll see everything in the background turned black. That black color is actually just representing transparency. So when we move something on V1, you're going to see that image behind her. The next thing I want to do before I finish with my mask is just click here and just drag it down. That helps avoid some of that flickering you might see at the bottom of a green screened video. And then another thing I'm going to do is scroll through my video. I'm just going to mute it so you don't have to listen to this right now. Just scroll through and see if Courtney moves outside of that key. And she doesn't. She's pretty still, actually, which means that we can tighten this up quite a bit. So the closer this mask is to the person who's on camera, the less of a chance you'll get some flickering stuff that I'm going to show you here in a minute. Basically, it's very difficult to light a green screen perfectly, and keying things out, it isn't necessarily as easy as you'd think. And so we want to remove all of these obstacles. And so by masking out a lot of the screen, we're removing a lot of the colors or the shades of green that aren't, the exact same shade, because you'll notice there are probably shadows if you're shooting this at home, or if you're not, shooting this in a professional TV studio. And I'm just going to go back through again, make sure that she doesn't fall out of that mask, which she doesn't do. We could tighten it up even more. You can add little more of these here if you wanted to customize, and you could even zoom in if you want to, but for the sake of time, I'm just going to leave it as is. So now we've masked. The next thing I want to do is remove the green screen. So now we're going down to the Ultra Key effect. So this is our Ultra Key setting in our effects control panel. This eyedropper, we're going to click on it, and then we're going to select the shade of green around Courtney. So let's just click like here, for example. And now you've noticed that everything behind her turned black. And so it seems like everything is transparent. But really, a good way to check this is by going over to our output and clicking on this drop-down menu and going to alpha channel. And then we'll notice that this isn't true black around her. So anything that's like gray or has any white on it is not going to be keyed out. And that's how you can really tell that somebody may have done a poor job with their green screen effect, because you can see flickering and maybe jagged edges, and it just doesn't look clean. So before we move on, I'm going to go back to my composite, and I'm just going to select another area and see if perhaps there's a better area in the green screen that has less, has more common shades of green. So here we're going to click, and we'll try it again, and maybe click here between her arms. That's actually very good. We can also hold down our command button or control on your PC, and that will select a few more pixels of green. That can help as well, depending on where you're clicking. But so far, it looks like probably the green shade that's kind of underneath her arm right here might be the best. But I always like to just click around first to make sure that I'm selecting the area that's going to key everything else out for us the best we can. So this one's not bad. You'll still see some stuff around here, but I think it might be the best area. So I'm going to hold down my command and I'll click here, and we're going to take a look to see if we can now remove this gray stuff right here using some of the other features. So when we go back to composite, you'll notice here that there's still, some green outline and stuff. So we're not done. There are lots of other things inside of our Ultra Key, and we can expand this so you could read this a little bit better. The ones that I usually like to start with is like contrast. That's one of my favorite ones. So when I click and hold this button here and drag to the right, you'll see that the black becomes more black, which is great because that means it's more transparent. But you always want to be careful anytime you're adjusting any of these. You may create a problem that wasn't originally there. And that usually happens around people's hair, and you might see some flickering. And so you always want to play the video. And I find it helpful at this point to move an image behind the person, because sometimes you can see it when it's black. So if I hit play here, I don't see a lot of flickering right now. I mean, it's not perfect up here. We can zoom in, and that's helpful. Right now, I'm also watching this in 1/2. I could change it to full to make it a little bit more clear, but you'll see that this isn't perfect. And so it does help to sometimes have whatever image or video you're planning on putting behind you down here already in V1 at this step. So I'm just going to go ahead and use this background, and I'm going to expand this image, and then I'm going to hit play. And sometimes that actually helps mask some of that imperfection. And in this case, it's not too bad, but we want to keep working on it to polish it a little bit more. So I am noticing like a green outline here. If you zoom in more and then move over, you'll see, there's a little bit of green. There's a little bit of a green outline, and that's caused by the lights reflecting off of the green screen. That's very common if you don't have a huge studio space to stand super far away from your green screen. So one of the things that you can do is choke. Choke is over here under the matte cleanup section. So click and hold on that and then just move it to the right. And then you'll see we're removing that green outline. But you're also, if you go all the way to 100, you're also removing like everything around them. So you want to make sure that you don't choke too much. Sometimes that can mess with people's hair, and you may see it more obvious that you have keyed them, because maybe if they have short hair and parts of it sticking up, you may create a problem. Like I noticed right here, I may have just created a problem, and it helps to hit play so that you can see that flickering. Usually I don't choke at 100%, just because of this issue. And you also don't want to make people look like you've made them smaller or cropped them. So if we go here, we are seeing a little bit flickering here. Let's go back and see if that's because of the choke. Sometimes it is. So you'll see what's happening is there is a strand of hair here, but part of the green screen has made its way through this tiny little opening here. And that's why this is happening. Most people's hair isn't like perfectly glued down to their heads. And if they are, that makes it a lot easier to key. But I have this problem too when I key myself. And so you just want to find a happy medium. You want to solve this problem right here that we had on her arm. So originally this is what we had, right? And we want to solve that problem, but we don't want to go beyond what we need, because then we end up causing other problems. So in this instance, I think maybe 50 is probably good. And then I'm going to hit fit again, and I'm just going to play it again and see if there's any other issues. And I don't really see a lot of problems that we need to fix. The other things that you could do if you have lots more flickering and you've clicked your eyedropper all over and you can't find a consistent green shade, sometimes pedestal is helpful, but you want to be careful with pedestal. So like, I don't think I need pedestal right now, but let's say I put like 100% pedestal. And it also sometimes is helpful to do this in the alpha channel so you can see what you're doing. If I do 100% pedestal, in this instance, it's not really helping me with the only issue that I see that I have, but it's not really causing many problems either, which is great. Sometimes it will remove parts of the person that's on screen, which you also don't want. So in this instance, it wasn't really fixing a problem, so I'm just going to leave it back down here because my only issue that I have right now is that one strand of hair. And after a while, you just kind of have to figure if you're doing something on a green screen and you don't have a professional studio, all these little things, people hopefully won't notice as much. So as long as you light everything properly, you light your green screen, then you should kind of avoid a lot of these things. But I think this is looking pretty good. The next thing I'm going to do is center her. So I'm going to go all the way back up here under my motion section, and I'm going to position her like centered. A really helpful way to do that is to make sure that you have this on your safe margins. So make sure that you drag and drop your safe margins into your panel here, and then click that on and off. When you click it on, you can see that the person is centered. And then when I click away, that mask outline goes away. So now I hit play, and I think this is pretty good. And you can replace this background, with anything, any image, any video. The last thing I always like to do is just make sure that my audio is good before I cut anything up, make sure that my volume level is good. So let's take a listen to this audio.
The number of children dying by...
It is just over -12. And of course, normally I would play the whole thing, but that's not too bad. In this instance, I'm using an MXF file, which is slightly different than if you were editing an MP4, because you can see there's 2 audio tracks here. If that's bothering you, you can always hold down the option button and select one of these and just delete it, because these are duplicate channels.
Drowning isn't going down. It's rising.
And then you'll notice that it ends up being right around here. The thing that I like to do just on every audio, I'll go over to my essential sound. There are some really cool features here in Premiere Pro. You could, for example, go into preset, dialogue, and select like the podcast voice. I think that tends to be really good. It helps make it more clear. And then if you want to remove a little bit background noise, that's usually helpful if you're not in a professional studio. You can listen to this That's usually the one that I check off and make sure that it doesn't sound unnatural.
Children dying by drowning isn't going down, it's rising. Welcome to Florida Focus. I'm Courtney Patterson.
It also used a vocal enhancer, so that increased the volume, and so I could decrease it a little bit like that, so it's not overmodulated.
The number of
And that's sounding a lot better. So the last thing I want to do is just trim everything. So I'm going to trim my video, and I always like to zoom in here to make sure that I'm getting it with a little bit of padding there in the front, but not too much. And then just cut off my virtual set here. And I'm going to right click, ripple delete to bring it all to the very beginning. And in this instance, let's just cut her off when she stops talking right there. All right, and that's how you key on a green screen whenever you're done. If this is all you want to do, then you'll go over to File, Export Media. And this is something that'll happen a lot. So if this happens to you where you say, I clicked on Export Media, it may be because one of these other windows are selected. So make sure that your timeline is selected, then go File, Export Media, and you could usually just use an H.264, which is the most common MP4 format. Make sure that you name it and save it by clicking on that. Name your file, save it where you want to save it, and then go ahead and click Export. And that's it.